Hey, good morning. I hope that many of you are here, had a nice week and got to spend some good quality time here in Palo Alto. We'd like to welcome everyone here for today's presentation. I'm very excited to see what came out. And I'm very happy that the Urban Land Institute was able to be here. They're going to present their initial findings today from their visit this week. So I'd actually like to take an opportunity to actually thank them and everyone who helped to put this together. I know there was a lot of work that was put into actually this week being productive. So I want to thank all of those, all the agency staff who was here, all the Stanford University and others who were actually put the effort that it was to help people get prepared for this and have this week actually come out with these findings. I also want to specifically thank those who were leaders in bringing this together. VTA has a Palo Alto Station Ad Hoc Committee led by Councilmember Pat Burt, also our supervisor Avakogi, who wasn't able to be here, and our VTA board chair and Campbell Mayor Lopez for their leadership, really regarding bringing this to this study together and actually really focusing this on as a key Bay Area transportation hub. So I really want to thank actually Councilmember and VTA board director Pat Burt, because actually this has been something that I have actually been following for the last 20 some years, and I'm glad he is so energized about it, and then that we're able to actually move this forward, because I am actually very energized about this as well. So I am now going to hand this off to Natalie from ULI to actually say a few words. So thank you for coming today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Sandoval, and I'm Executive Director of ULI San Francisco. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about ULI. ULI is a global membership-based organization, which stands for the Urban Land Institute. And our mission is to really help support thriving and sustaining communities. And our members are really what makes ULI so special. They come from all fields of the land use and real estate industry, from architects and engineers to city planners to developers and folks in finance. And that's really what makes the organization so unique. And what we do is bring those members together to help solve complex land use issues. So a really big thank you to our panelists here who you will hear from today. They are all volunteers representing their expertise in their field, but they came here from all different places in the country to spend 5 days in Palo Alto to address this complex project. So also thank you so much to VTA and Stanford and the City of Palo Alto for entrusting ULI to address this issue. This conversation started about 3 years ago about bringing this panel together, so really excited that we're here today. And locally, as I mentioned, I represent ULI San Francisco, and ULI San Francisco covers the entire Bay Area region from the North Bay to the South Bay and Silicon Valley, and we're one of the largest district councils. So we're super excited to be here today, and I really look forward to what all of the panelists came up with this week. So thank you very much. With that, I'll pass it off to the panel chair, Brad Power.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We certainly and sincerely appreciate it. My name is Brad Power, and I had the privilege this week to serve as the chair of the Advisory Services Panel for the Palo Alto Transportation Center. And we hope that you enjoy and take up our recommendations in the spirit in which they're intended. But before we start, I just want to pick up a little bit about what Natalie said and expand the discussion around ULI to specifically what the Advisory Services Program does. ULI has been in existence for over 80 years, and for about 75 of that, so for almost its entire existence, the Advisory Service Program has gone to cities around the country and even around the world and done what we have done the last 5 days. Take on a challenge, take on a series of issues, take on a series of questions, reflect on that based on our experience elsewhere, and bring back recommendations to the local community. So that's really what the Advisory Services Program is all about. And obviously that's what we did here this week. Natalie is also very correct in that we really tried to have a diverse level of experience from drawing from our panel. We have planners, we have transportation experts, we have designer, we have somebody from the development community. I'd also say that this panel is very well represented both currently and in the past by public sector members as well. So there's a lot of either municipal, state or federal experience on the panel as well. The panel members themselves will introduce themselves as they go through their portion of the presentation as we go along through the rest of this morning. Here's what we did this week. We all arrived on Sunday and we had a welcome dinner with the sponsorship team or the sponsor team on Sunday evening, started to talk about some of the issues in the area, get familiar with the downtown, the station and the Stanford area. And that was on Sunday. We did a sponsor briefing and then also had a tour on Monday where we spent a couple hours on foot going through the entire area and getting kind of an overview of the conditions, kind of how it feels to be on the ground and how it feels to be in the space. And that was inordinately helpful to us. And then one of the really important things that happened during the 5 days is on Tuesday, we interviewed approximately 60 people. A lot of you are in this room. So we interviewed a wide range of stakeholders that know this area well, have experienced this area in certain instances for decades, and provided us with a lot of really good information to take back and start to formulate and start to shape our deliberations and the things that we were starting to think about in terms of recommendations. And that's what we did the last 2 days. We sequestered ourselves and spent probably, 12 hours on Wednesday and probably 16 hours yesterday. Some of the staff was even more on yesterday. And that's what we did the last couple of days to really first discuss the issues and then start to formulate the recommendations. And that's what today is about, to hear our report and what we're going to be leaving with you, and so that you can take it well into the future. I just realized that I failed to do something. I failed to introduce our amazing staff. And I want to go back and make sure that I recognize Lauren Callahan, Senior Director for Advisory Services, Claire Lowe, Senior Associate from the ULI San Francisco District Council, our amazing logistician, Annette Suriani. It was great this week. Thank you, Annette, for all of your support and work. And then you just heard from Natalie. I want to make a special shout out to Lauren, especially because this happens to be the 20th panel she's done as a staff member at ULI. So she reached a milestone here in Palo Alto. So I apologize for having to backtrack. I also want to especially thank the sponsors who brought this panel together: City of Palo Alto, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, and Stanford University. These groups worked together to formulate all of the information that we were able to review over the course of the week and even before we got here, and obviously had a big role in the stakeholder interviews, but also provided resources to us throughout the week. It was inordinately helpful. We could not have done this, obviously, this level of work without the support of the terrific sponsors that we had. We also want to just recognize everybody that we talked to. We talked to all of these folks. There might have even been some other folks that we talked to, but these are the folks that we spent that time on Tuesday with. And again, we're just very grateful for the level of passion you have for your community, the level of passion you have for transit, and obviously the level of commitment that you have to transforming this part of the community. I also want to recognize the ad hoc committee, who are the folks who championed the effort to start to think about how to transform the transit center into its next generation of vitality in this community. Setting it up for the future is something that the ad hoc committee really took their passion toward, and we really appreciate their efforts as well. One of the things that's really interesting that we discovered, I think we all kind of knew this before we got here, but this is obviously the cradle of innovation. And we've kind of known that just kind of as Palo Alto's national, even worldwide reputation as a technology hub. And that was really confirmed for us. It was certainly confirmed for me this week. It was really interesting to kind of live it on the ground and see it. But there's also a lot of passion and commitment around the innovation around transit. The fact that all of these transit services are existing here is something that's very unique, I think, to this region and obviously to this community, and something really to take advantage of and even grow even more into the future. We looked at we'll take a quick look. The outline of the study area is the blue dashed line. And so it's that area between obviously downtown Palo Alto and the beginning of the Stanford campus. We started to refer this as the gateway because it's kind of that land in between. And so we wanted to have a positive connotation of what this area could represent. So we started to call it the gateway. My colleagues, you'll see that we chose during the course of the week to expand our thinking a little bit broader than this just dashed line. So I'll leave it to my colleagues to explain why we did this and why we think it makes sense to consider that going forward. These are the questions that the sponsors asked us to look through, and it was a combination of looking at what type of future uses could happen on the site, what can we do, what could happen to make the transit center itself more accessible and navigable. What are the models elsewhere that maybe in the future Palo Alto could take this work and maybe springboard into some case studies elsewhere to take a look at best practices and that type of thing. So we have some ideas around that. What type of mix of uses would be most feasible in this area? So you'll hear what our take is on the predominant types of development we think would be recommended for this area. And then what kind of phasing and financing options make sense both in the mid and longer term to transform the next generation of the transit center's evolution. You know, a lot of communities, I think, when they take on these types of discussions and type of situations, they kind of think about what's wrong and what do we have to fix. But we realize very quickly that there's a lot that's right here. And obviously the transit services between the rail and the local and the regional bus lines is just such a tremendous asset to capitalize on. So that's definitely something that's right. The idea of the longstanding partnerships between the transit agencies, the city, the university, you've built those relationships around transit and other items or other issues. We want you to leverage that going forward specifically for the future of the transit center. We think that's a tremendous opportunity to really build some consensus and some energy around that. Obviously, you're all much more familiar than we are probably with the recent adoption of Senate Bill 79. And so our colleagues, again, will talk about how Palo Alto could possibly achieve the goals related to that new state legislation within this gateway area and meet those needs for housing going forward. And then again, we just want to reiterate, one of the things that struck us is just the people walking and biking everywhere in this community. It's such a inherent part of the culture here that it really was reflected on us. And we want to make sure that whatever happens at the transit center, that is built upon and incorporated well into the future as well. So I would just say you have a tremendous opportunity. And from our perspective, from people who are from all over the country, don't let it pass by. Take advantage of it. A lot of communities would be very envious of what you have and what you could do. So please capitalize on the opportunity. So with that, before we get started, if you all would just kind of relax, because we want to tell you a story from the future.
It's a warm and sunny late afternoon in August. Kayla and her parents are arriving at the Palo Alto Transit Center on the Caltrain from San Francisco, part of their long trip from Illinois. They didn't have to wait long for their train, with high-speed service running every 10 minutes. Before they knew it, the doors of the train opened at a sleek Art Deco-style station. The platform streams with people, but Kayla's eye is caught by the electronic kiosk listing upcoming events at Stanford University, where she is excited to be an incoming freshman. The Palo Alto events kiosk is surrounded by a group of young commuters just off the train. They're looking for the start time of a concert. Kayla pauses and turns a slow 360 degrees on the platform. Art seems to be everywhere. She can see 2 sculptures on the platform and a banner in the station breezeway promoting travel-themed display curated by Stanford's Cantor Art Center. Opposite the banner, Kayla sees a line at the coffee and sandwich shop in the station where people snagging grab-and-go dinner items from cases along the coffee shop wall stocked by nearby restaurants. Right behind the station, she sees a beautiful apartment building with a bright, light-filled ground floor lobby. Kayla's drawn to a lively event space that's hosting a big reception. Behind the apartment building, a broad paved path leads diagonally to a street, and on the corner, she sees a gleaming hotel and conference center spire with the flag of the Stanford Shopping Center. She'll come to know this intersection as Quarry Road and El Camino Real. She's happy to see a nearby place to get the things to make sure her dorm can be fully kitted out, style and function-wise. A steady stream of buses pauses at the marked crosswalk before queuing up at a series of staggered bus bays west of the station. Many of the buses say Marguerite, and Kayla knows right away that she'll be a regular rider of those Stanford shuttle buses. Turning back towards the station, Kayla sees signs pointing her down a path towards University Plaza and into the city of Palo Alto. Kayla wants to make sure her parents get settled in their hotel off University Avenue. They wheel their suitcases down a ramp and into a broad, brightly lit tunnel lined with murals. Look, Mom and Dad, did you know all these amazing inventions, technologies, and companies got their start right here? Look, Apple, Netflix, Google, Facebook, PayPal, Hewlett-Packard. The faces of these company founders and their inventions are depicted in colorful murals that line one wall. Too soon, Kayla and her parents are out of the tunnel gallery and on University Avenue. A series of shallow steps in a bowl-shaped plaza, like a pair of cupped hands, create a public space where people sit with faces turned toward the late afternoon sun while dozens of bicycles roll past in a broad, dedicated bike lanes through the center of the plaza. A row of stacked townhouses line Alma Street, backing onto the train tracks. Up and down the street, people are opening their doors as they get home from work or as they exit with strollers or dogs on leashes towards downtown Palo Alto and the Embarcadero Trail. One of those residents is Felix, who works at a nonprofit. Buying this townhome has been a huge stretch for Felix and his partner, Co, but it was life-changing. They had been a two-car family with long commutes before they were able to live in Palo Alto. But they had been able to get rid of one car immediately. A Go Pass was a commuter benefit that Co's employer offered, and now they live so near the station, they're planning to sell their other car too. This means $2,000 less in car-related monthly expenses. That swing in their monthly spending was what made it possible to afford this new home. Kayla and her parents look in the big windows of restaurants, hotels, coffee shops, galleries, apartment lobbies, and other businesses as they walk up University Avenue. Kayla made note of the location of a hardware store. She has posters to hang, just as they reach their hotel. Fred owns the hardware store, and he's recently extended his hours to 7:30 p.m. to capture more trade from commuters returning home from work. New housing, a mix of rental and for sale, along Alma, Mitchell, Embarcadero, and El Camino has brought a notable uptick in business. Many new customers have asked him so much about home maintenance and basic repair that Fred has jokingly said he should hold classes. The response was serious and enthusiastic. The first Saturday sessions with Fred on home repairs is starting next week. Kayla watches the pedestrians meander along University Avenue as her parents check into their hotel. Kayla knows a lot about Stanford University, and she still pinches herself that she's enrolled here. Looking around and thinking about her first impressions of the place she'll be for the next 4 years, she registers the wonder of high-speed trains every 10 minutes, the fleets of buses immediately on hand to get her to her dorm or grocery stores, and how easy biking and walking will be. She nods at other first impressions of Palo Alto, the spaces for art, the paths for walking and biking, the plazas for sitting, talking, and gathering, the intimate scale of the streets, the lively and interesting storefronts, and the sidewalks filled with cafes and people walking are all inviting. She smiles at her parents. There's no place I'd rather be.
We got some great advice in our conversations with stakeholders about storytelling, and that really inspired us, I think, to think about the future in that kind of way. I'm Harriet Tregoning. I'm the director of the New Urban Mobility Alliance based in Washington, D.C., but what I really am is a longtime government policy entrepreneur, working at the federal, state, regional, and local level, and I'm really excited to be here with you this morning. I'm going to do some context setting for the rest of our conversation. Certainly the elephant in the room is SB 79, and all I can say to our sponsors is what great timing, starting 3 years ago to organize this convening and having us start right when that legislation was signed. But a big part of the context you already know, and you've focused on it for a while in this region, which is housing. We are in a national housing crisis, and California represents somewhere between 1.3 and 3.4 million units of what's been estimated as a national deficit of 5 to 7 million units today. We're seeing this crisis all across the country with rising rents and low inventories of for-sale housing. Virtually every state is impacted by the national housing crisis. Home prices are up more than 50% in the last 5 years. But it's also true that it affects renters, homeowners, really all but the wealthiest, and in every geography of our country. It has really spawned action at the state and local level with lots of solutions popping up. Building code modifications, ADU ordinances, getting rid in some cases of single family zoning, subsidizing not just low income housing or workforce, but in some cases other higher income households. Housing trust funds, patient capital investment funds, land trusts. But really one of the biggest things to happen across the country has been in California. You've had a series of legislative initiatives that have sparked interest and imitators across the nation. SB 79 is above and beyond all of that. And it's not surprising in some ways that this bill really focuses on pushing new growth toward transit. Housing and transportation have always been really related. In each of your households, those are the two biggest costs likely in your budget. And it makes sense to think about them because we might track them as different costs, but they're really, you don't have a separate housing budget and a separate transportation budget. And we know that the closer you are to transit, the higher the housing costs are, but you get to have lower transportation expenses. On the other hand, there's such a thing in our country as drive to you qualify. People move further and further out until the housing prices are low enough that they can manage to get a mortgage. But no one asked them what their transportation costs are going to be, and they've been astronomical. And let's be clear, it's not really equal for those two households, right? That choice that they can make. On the one hand, if you're able to buy a home near transit, you have a really solid appreciating asset. If you're buying far away from where you work and where all the activity centers are, you're putting more and more miles on your car, spending more and more time away from your family. and the things that you might like to do, but you're really spending your money on depreciating durable goods, not on assets that are going to leave you in a better financial position. So a pattern that forces this on families that are moving to the state really puts them in a rough place for their financial future. Housing is a growing issue for other states too. And 27 governors just this year in their State of the State addresses made housing a top priority. And they're also taking executive action. One of the most interesting executive actions taken anywhere in the country was by your governor last July when he issued this executive order on infill housing. But other states are also starting to ask, what can metropolitan planning organizations, transit agencies, state departments of transportation do to think about helping with this housing crisis? And it seems kind of natural to look toward TOD to start, or transit-oriented development, to start thinking about this. Transit sites typically have large parcels. In the Denver region, there are hundreds of acres in parking near their transit stations. Initially park and ride lots, but as the system got more built out, they're more in the center of activity now. So thinking about how those large sites might accommodate a larger scale development, they have more favorable zoning typically. It's the place, if you're gonna have density, that you'd allow it. More height, more lot coverage, lowest parking requirements, in some cases no parking requirements. And also for cities and municipal governments, county governments, the economic development impact of density near transit is pretty powerful per acre compared to almost any other kind of use. I'll also say that doing TOD creates opportunities to improve safety and circulation, depending on how you design that new housing. I mentioned that governors have started to look to their DOTs, beginning with California, and let me just briefly talk about the ways. The first thing is land. And even at this Palo Alto Transit Center site, there are agencies that have land that might be able to be made available for other uses, including development. It's also possible to use something called joint development for transportation authorities to directly co-invest in housing and other mixed-use development. State and local programs exist to help finance housing near transit. And there's also ways in California in particular, more so than any other state, that transportation agencies can improve transportation system performance, vehicle travel, CO2 emissions, and access by making such investments. They can also mitigate environmental harms under CEQA using housing near transit. The state has calibrated very carefully what the value of that is in terms of VMT and carbon. So you have some options for this that other places really don't have. And of course, you do have SB 79. Looking at TOD near high capacity transit is what SB 79 is really requiring folks to do. And what this illustration shows is various ways in which density can be accommodated, right? It requires more density, but it gives Palo Alto and other jurisdictions in 8 counties the ability to decide for themselves what makes the most sense. You can spread that density like peanut butter over a wide area where everything gets a little denser, or you can pick a few sites where you can concentrate more of the development and essentially protect areas where you don't want that density to go. But let's be clear, it does change what's going to be required with respect to development in any kind of proximity to transit. I will say that this move is going to be watched very carefully by everyone. We're really excited to be here just as you're starting to have conversations about the impact and how that changes what might happen. But let's also be clear that there are fundamental issues with funding and financing housing right now that this bill doesn't fix. Zoning, the right zoning is necessary, but not sufficient. So one of the things that we're going to urge you to do is act with some urgency around these issues. You are so well positioned relative to so many other places that are going to be affected by this that you need to start soon with conversations with state officials and with the MPO about how you can be an example of the very best kind of outcomes that SB 79 could possibly generate, including some projects that actually get funded and built. And there's going to be a first mover advantage to doing that, because there isn't enough money to fund and finance everything that might be proposed, nor is everyone going to be ready for this as soon as other places. So in some ways, a small jurisdiction with a transit center like the kind that you have might be the very best place to start. So all I'll really say about it is your advantages are clear: great service, second highest ridership, great Go Pass usage, substantial locations that we'll talk about later, where there's high capacity for housing, very close to the station, but also away from historically low-rise downtown Palo Alto, and a high mode split to bicycling and walking, and very effective policies. Not everyone might love the trip cap, but I have rarely seen anything work so effectively as the university's general use permit to really change the incentives for transit use and for encouraging alternatives to single occupancy vehicles. You have these longstanding partnerships that are wonderful, and a lot of the infrastructure that you really need to have. But that doesn't mean you can rest on your laurels. You need to continue this collaborative process with a lot more clarity about what the goals and aspirations are of every partner. Right now, you're often guessing what the person across the table from you wants from the perspective of their organization. You need to be very clear about what's success for each one of you to be able to move forward. That is an important next step. You're going to have to determine the short and long-term changes in the built environment that better help you align those goals and aspirations that you're going to make clear of the partner organizations in the community to help do the things that you've charged us to consider: a more inviting gateway, better pedestrian and bike accessibility, more station throughput, a more feasible mix of uses, and what I'm calling protective density, the right places for density so that you can protect other places that aren't the right places. And encouraging development that helps everybody, increases revenues, housing affordability, safety, access to transit and daily needs. And instead of making wayfinding and access an afterthought, which seems a little bit what the current condition is, all of these changes give you the opportunity to prioritize pedestrian route directness, bike directness, legibility, so that it's really clear as soon as you step off the train what a wonderful place you're in and what all the options are in front of you, just like Kayla saw as she looked around the station. So reach out early to the MTC and state officials, and thank you so much for letting us be here today.
Good morning, all. My name is Aaron Kowalski. I am here visiting from Indianapolis, Indiana, and so here supporting the Midwest, but visiting here in California. And I understand there's a number of folks in here that have roots in the Midwest. I'm an urban planner, and I've really spent the bulk of my career working in the Midwest and the Southeast. I'm also an active ULI member, part of the Indianapolis chapter, and I really enjoy opportunities like this to go to communities that are outside of where I usually work, to listen and learn from you all and help you problem solve, frankly, for complex issues. I work for a firm called MKSK, that's a national landscape architecture and urban planning firm. And as part of that work, I've really specialized in transit-oriented development as well as trail-oriented development. So that's kind of the lens that I brought to this discussion here. I'm here to talk development, but as we kind of been talking a little bit about, there's some steps that we believe you all could take now to really be proactive and enable you to get the development that you all want. And so stepping back, thinking through the storytelling activity, as we think about land use and development and creating a model transit gateway, this is really the link, the gateway between the university, the downtown area, the community. There are stakeholders that have vested interest in what happens with this property. And truly, this is also an opportunity for us to respect and protect the character of this community, the vibrant city, the vibrant university, while still supporting the future and really trying to strike that balance in a way that achieves those goals for housing. You know, why this is important, and I love the newspaper article that came out this week, taller buildings are on the way. This is really making the case for development where it makes sense, but then also making the case for development in areas that also allow for the character of the community to continue, the strong businesses of the community to continue to be vibrant and try to make this place even more vibrant. We had an opportunity to review your all's citywide comprehensive plan. That is a land use guidance document that cities put together, and it really is the long-term vision for the community. It talked a lot about housing and the needs for housing. I think you all know the housing pressures here in the community, and that you are a community that has more jobs than available housing. So we're looking into delivering workforce, faculty, and student housing close to transit. Those are the people that are going to use your transit the most, as well as the wonderful bus service for the university. And we also think this is an opportunity for an innovative partnership between the university and the city in really being able to share that opportunity together and really embrace it. The comprehensive plan, and I won't read this quote here, but if you haven't looked at the comprehensive plan, it's a great guidance document that captures a lot of the thoughts of the community, the elected officials, and really charts that path forward, especially from a land use and growth perspective. We know that there's an imbalance of jobs versus residents. We've talked about that, and what's resulted is skyrocketing housing costs. And so how do we begin to address that, but do so in a way that also encourages vibrant and strong urban design? So you see some images here, and really what we're trying to create with this gateway, with this transit-oriented development district, is not something that detracts at all from the university campus or the downtown area, but really building a bridge between the two, and doing so in a way that also makes that station experience feel safer, more vibrant, and encourages people to gather in this place. And so, you know, if you can kind of think about creating an active place with a lot of different activities that really strengthens the two partners, Palo Alto and Stanford. As Brad mentioned, we started out with a study area we were looking at, and we realized really quickly that we needed to expand what we call our area of consideration that's there on the screen in yellow. And I know it's small, but I'll just kind of point out the boundaries. So here we have Palo Alto Avenue that turns into Sand Hill. We have El Camino Real, Quarry Road, Embarcadero Road, and then Alma Street. And really thinking about that is the core of where the investments that happen directly at the station area will impact those land uses and the vibrancy of the businesses that exist kind of in that entire area in the yellow. We also believe that there's some opportunities on the other side of El Camino Real for investment, and we understand in talking with the university, they have some goals for this area as well. And so how do we begin to unpack this transition zone? I've heard from some stakeholders saying that this is kind of a no man's zone, and really trying to fix that through this process. The land between the rail tracks, you can see the wonderful university, the historic farm and arboretum, as well as the downtown area. This is neither of those things. It's something different, but it really is the zipper that can connect these two. And so how do we get you there? So we spent a lot of time reviewing your all's comprehensive plan, your zoning ordinance. So one of the things right out of the gate that a community can do in concert with the property owners, university, transit agencies, et cetera, is get your land use updated. And you all have, some information within your future land use that calls out transit residential. There's some mixed use categories. We think this is a little different though. And the reason I say that is really the core of this area here is transit-oriented development. And as Harriet mentioned, this is also a place where you can strike the balance for the type of density that's required by state law, as well as the desires of the community and the university to really try to maintain the historic fabric of the downtown area and the character of the campus. And so this is a place that we think that could be achieved. The area in kind of purple here, from a land use perspective, we propose remains major institution, special facility. That's the bulk of the transit facility, the bus facility. We'll talk a little bit about how that could be expanded in the future. And then we do believe that from a future perspective, where the shopping center is, that there's an opportunity for a future land use consideration to encourage a hotel and conference center to go into that area. So as we look at future land use, we have some proposed changes here. This is your existing future land use map here on the other side of the screen. But really, we want to align the future land use within the city's comprehensive plan, which would require a small update to the comprehensive plan in order to achieve the TOD goals. As I mentioned, you have these two transit-oriented or mixed-use districts. We think this is a little different, though. We think that this could be an updated transit mixed-use, future land use type that could encourage compact, walkable, transit-supported development with housing, retail supported by that housing and transit, but not detracting from the retail vibrancy and the commercial businesses in the downtown area in an urban way, utilizing your existing future land use categorization for a commercial hotel, again, trying to get that hospitality use potential, and then again, keeping your major institution and special facility land use in place. We also took a look at zoning. So land use goes first, then zoning. Zoning is the ordinance, it's the legal document that that enables development to occur. And so this area is currently has a couple different base zoning categorizations. The city also has what's called a combining zoning, also known as a zoning overlay. And so we believe playing off of some of your existing, it's called PTOD zoning that you have for the California Avenue Station area, that could be updated in order to create a new gateway district zoning. And honestly, some of the reasons for that is to enable the development so you all can set the terms of the development, that you can work with the property owners to ensure a high quality of development, and that it really is done so in a way that's clear, proactive, and allows for staff and the architectural review board to have a big part of this process. This is what you have to do to enable the kind of development that you want, so that you don't have the state imposing that on you. You have to be proactive about this. And so from a core standards perspective, we want to permit transit facilities, university and civic buildings, multifamily housing, mixed use with active ground floors, structured and underground parking. We think that this is a place where you can get the density, again, to what Harriet was saying, so that you don't have to spread that density around as much. This is a place where you really can concentrate it so you can achieve what's required as part of the state law. We think this is also an urban space with opportunities for shared parking or reduced parking. Perhaps it's an opportunity for shared parking agreements with some of the parking garages in your downtown area. There could be leased spots, things like that, that could reduce the cost of infrastructure, as well as allow for people really to be utilizing this as part of the larger downtown area. And again, public space, really important. We know that with the station area, there's an RFP out to get the transit center reopened with some public uses. We talked a little bit in our visioning about maybe a partnership with the art museum. The whole goal here is as private development or university development occurs in this area, that public space is intentional and that it's part of it and it's baked into the development. This then allows for an urban design of a mid-rise density from a building perspective, but then stepping down to the downtown area and doing so in a way that also supports high-quality mobility and infill and redevelopment. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Andrew.
I'll just hold it. My name's Andrew Malik. I'm a real estate developer from San Diego. Trying to figure out how to phrase this. So maybe the local parlance, I think this new gateway zone is Palo Alto 3.0. You know, this is, I won't define what 1.0 or 2.0 is, but you know, this is an opportunity to kind of look forward. And as Aaron mentioned, we're not trying to replace or compete with what you have, but support and enhance it. You know, I think that's what's important from the developer perspective is that we have a phrase in amongst our circle, time kills all deals. So, you know, as it relates to process and implementation, I would encourage you to create objective design standards and then trust the talented design review board that you have to ensure that they're met. But we need to make sure that there's a streamlined process if we actually want to get things built. Okay. There's lots of ways to quantify land value. The first is a little bit hidden. The land in this gateway zone is uniquely valuable. Most of Palo Alto is comprised of small lots with separate ownership. That's not the case here. You have large parcels of land with only a handful of owners. The reason this is important is because you instantly have the ability to do high density housing and to fulfill the SB 79 requirements. There's also sort of monetary value. And as land density increases, so does the value of that land. And some of this increasing value can help to pay for the infrastructure improvements, operations of things at the station, or other community priorities. This may be one of the harder things for your community to reconcile, and I think that this is something to take seriously. There's two very important things that you need to weigh when you're weighing this increasing value and how it's split. If you burden the development entities or the landowners with too much, you stop the development, you halt it. Yet you don't want it to be a cash grab for those existing landowners that just got the benefit of having this land. I don't know how to, oh, I'm pointing it the wrong direction. Did it go? No. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we in the ULI have best practices. The ULI has a great library of case studies and reports that talk about sort of best practices for transit-oriented developments. But there's some main themes, primary themes that I wanted to talk about here. This is a different development pattern, and it's a foreign one to one we're used to. We live in a car world. We're very used to our private automobiles, and it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock to absorb some of the principles of TOD because they're not car-based. We're to optimize land use at a transit-oriented development site. You're focusing on increasing ridership as opposed to the convenience of an automobile user. And so some of the things that we recommend, you'll see how that's implemented. The second principle that's very important is focus on the pedestrian, walking first. That mode of transit trumps all others. That's the most important thing for creating a successful place here. And the third thing is, as it relates to mobility, the bus and the transit operations of that bus are more important than the existing automobile traffic that is entering and exiting, this area. As it relates to our development vision, we have some principles as well. The most important thing here is we got to mix uses. Mix is the key word, not just mixing uses, but mixing people. We want to create a place for people of all stages of life, multiple income levels. This is very, very important. This is the heart of a community, is balancing the housing needs for all stages of life. That means children to seniors. So I strongly encourage you to consider family housing here too, though it's not a typical housing type you would consider in a multifamily housing context. Second, we want to activate the ground floors. We're not trying to compete with downtown, but we need to make this place convenient. You need to be able to walk downstairs, grab a cup of coffee. There needs to be meeting places, childcare, in a walkable, convenient location from your home. One of these, the last point here is sort of related to programming. We heard from many constituents and people that we spoke to that there's a lacking in meeting and event space, that's sort of a shared space that both university and the community can meet at. So this could host art shows, hobby meetings, community events. These community spaces are the heart of a district like this. We are stronger when we get together as people. So it's very important that these spaces exist in the development. Okay, I won't get into the case study too much, but I will say this. It helps when you're looking at these places to get precedence. Now, Europe has been developed around transit for a long time. Copenhagen has a wonderful system called the S-Line. There's a lot of parallels to what you guys have here. But the reason we want to point you to studying the S-Line is it has dense development patterns around these station nodes. And then it drops off significantly as you go further from the station into a more single-family context in the neighborhoods. Sounds familiar to Palo Alto. They also have very, very good last mile solutions. And so I would encourage you to look at those. Okay, as it relates to development recommendations, this is going to start sounding redundant, but I figure if I say it over and over again, eventually you guys will get it. Focus the housing density at the station plaza. This creates a vibrant, activated place. This enhances the feeling of safety and makes for an inviting environment. 2, design for visual connection with transparent, inviting ground floors, activated and programmed with uses for all times of day. This reinforces the eyes on the street philosophy and that sort of safe place environment when you can self-police. And 3rd, respect and showcase the historic train station. It's a beautiful building. Let it be the welcome mat to both the city and the university. Lastly, relocate uncompatible uses that hog valuable land. This doesn't mean destroying the valuable historic resources that exist at the site, but moving them to less valuable land in the region. Okay, this is what everybody's waiting for, right? They want to see a picture of what this could be. I caution you to say that, we're trying to dream here. This is, something that you guys will have to debate as a community, but here's how we saw it. There's 3 distinct zones that we looked at. Along the western edge of downtown, you'll see yellow stripes. These were the row homes or townhomes that Kayla saw Felix live in the story you heard at the beginning. One of our, what we realized when we walked in this area was this edge of downtown was really lacking a bookend. And if you plan this area with row home that, are about 40 feet tall, it really is a good bookend, but it also starts to activate the not very successful retail on that edge of downtown. And so this is going to start to define sort of a different zone of the city and really, really help activate that area. It also is a gradual density increase to what will go on the other side of the tracks, which is the second area I'll talk about, the station area. These are the orange buildings right adjacent to the station in the middle of the diagram. The first thing is we've relocated and or demoed 2 of the buildings. We relocate the MacArthur Park Julia Morgan building to a location of your choosing. And we have suggested to demolish the existing Red Cross facility and replace it with 2 buildings. These 2 buildings are 11 stories tall in this current study, with a yield of about 500 units. They would be about 120 feet tall, so not as tall as some of the taller buildings you have in the area. I think 137 feet was the sort of the tallest building. So yeah, that's what we would encourage you build there. And then the sight lines should be respected. So when you plan the locations of these buildings, where are people going and where are they coming? And so if it may be hard to recognize, but when you're standing at the south edge of the train platform, you actually have a vantage point right up Palm Avenue to the Oval at Stanford's campus. And so you look up that beautiful arboretum. And then conversely, if you're standing on the north end of the station and looking west, you look directly towards the Simons Shopping Center. And so that's one of these desire lines, these paths where people should have a direct connection for pedestrians to get to these. These are the primary locations to the west. Okay. I guess the last thing I'll mention about this is I was so excited when I read what Palo Alto meant. Tall stick, I believe. I've been studying for about 5 years mass timber. If you want to do a forward-thinking, sustainable building construction solution, you look at this technology. It is 30% faster to build. It has a carbon footprint that is almost half that of competing construction types in concrete. And I think I'll get shoot off the stage if I keep talking about it, but you really, really should look at it. There's a parallel to tall stick and mass timber, but I think it's a sustainable solution for the future. And I'll just show you a picture of the interior of one of these spaces. It is extremely warm and inviting because you can expose the wood ceilings and the beams, and there's biophilic properties that are healthy. So I could go on and on about it, but and then here's some of the row homes you could see at that eastern edge. Okay, the last thing I'll talk about, in terms of the station surrounds, is we didn't want to get too prescriptive here, but we do imagine that the Sheraton Hotel is reaching the end of its useful life, and it's extremely valuable land. So we suggest that this be upzoned to also have high-density housing and potentially could house or the relocated MacArthur Park restaurant location. Across the way, you'll notice that we think that you already have 2 hotels that are along El Camino. They serve a useful purpose adjacent to the health center, but 3 may be too many. Maybe if you moved one of those over to the corner of the Simons Mall, that you could get the benefit of having, a hospitality group that is adjacent to another regional draw. This also does the double-ended purpose of reducing car trips, because there probably were a fair amount of car trips between those 2 locations that would compete with the transit, which we don't want to do. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up. Okay. These are all big picture vision ideas that may take a couple years. There's some immediate things that you guys can do right now. I mean, that station is so ready to be activated again. And we think that it's low-hanging fruit to get that going. So we love the cafe in there. We think it should be reinvigorated. We also believe that this should be a welcome center. Activate this with a welcome center that has visitor information for people that are coming through the station. You could sell books that tell the history of place. It could be run by volunteers, but you should really work together in conjunction, the community and the university, to activate this space and make it the welcome mat that it should be. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Rob, who's going to speak now about the transit changes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Guptill. I am a transportation planner hailing from Boston, Massachusetts, where I work for a transportation engineering company called VHB, doing work up and down the eastern coast. So I want to reiterate how thankful I was and the team was for the opportunities that we had to go out and do the site visits, to have the interviews. We learned so much. There were so many things that were pointed out to us in terms of what works, what doesn't work. And I think what I would like to start off with is talking about some of those observations that staff, VTA staff, city staff, Stanford staff all made to us and that we observed on our own. Oops, that's the wrong direction. So just to orient, here we have Stanford University, obviously, in Palo Alto. So what everyone kind of recognizes here is the center of the TOD that we're all talking about here is the Caltrain service, high frequency service plan for the future. Today, pretty robust service that is today, the second busiest Caltrain station in the system. So, but it does create some barriers between one side of the community and the other that have to be accounted for. In the other direction, crossing that is University Avenue. University Avenue obviously is the connection between Stanford University, one of the connections between Stanford University and downtown Palo Alto. And it's underneath the train right of way. Because of this structure of the roadway, you have this rather confusing and circuitous system of ramps and tunnels with the designs that predate the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some of the passages are poorly lit and noisy due to the 4 adjacent lanes of traffic on University Avenue. And here are some of those crossings there. And as we kind of see that many of them, that you can only make these crossings through these underground tunnels along University Avenue. They're the only places to do that across the corridor. And in terms of some of those passages, the wayfinding is left to be desired, and I would say in some cases, and we're very excited to hear that there's a lot of interest in the MTC project to use this station as a pilot study to improve wayfinding throughout the station. So in terms of transit, bus services are located in multiple areas, which could create some confusion for people. You have the Marguerite service that's along the University Loop, and then all the other bus operators, VTA, Samtrans, and AC Transit serve the busway. Generally, in looking at how the busway is operating, it looks like it works pretty well. Riders wait for buses in a shaded open air platform. Operations seem to work pretty well. There seems to be enough berthing space, though we did hear from several people that there are times when there isn't enough layover space for buses to lay over around the perimeter of that busway. In terms of connecting the transit center to the busway, it's not a long walk, but it is maybe not the most obvious one. And certainly when we were out there, we viewed some people, even though there's a sign clearly stating that you shouldn't do this, stepping off the curb and walking down an active busway to get to the busway. So making that clearer, making that safer, making that, improving the accessibility of that, it could definitely be an opportunity. And in terms of buses where they're laying over, the Samtrans buses lay over on the on-ramps and off-ramps for El Camino Real because there isn't enough of that layover space inside the busway. So if there was a way to expand the busway capacity to be able to accommodate all service within the busway, that could certainly not only improve transit operations, but make it simpler for riders. And then along University Avenue, there are, the curb cuts are not always fully accessible. They're not detectable warning strips at many of them. And as you're walking up and down University Avenue, because of the on and off ramps for El Camino Real and Alma Street, pedestrians and bicyclists certainly have to be very cognizant of the traffic around them because of vehicles making moves at all directions. And then finally, you have the Embarcadero bike path here. This is a fantastic connection, obviously, but it dead ends at the station. And bicyclists are pretty much forced to make a choice to continue along the right-of-way of the tracks. They can either pull into a constricted raised curb that is also serving as the platform for the southbound train traffic, or they have the option of biking down into the street where there is where the Marguerite buses are actively running through it. So it's definitely not the safest situation for bicyclists. Oh, and then finally, crossing Alma Street. In terms of where those crossings exist, they're to the either end of the platforms. There's no center crossing, and when they do cross, you have to walk through a parking lot to get to the station. All right, so in terms of some short-term recommendations, these are all stemming from those observations that we were just talking about making. And these are things that, again, we heard during the interviews and the site visits. So let's just go through them quickly here. So in terms of improving pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, it could be a quick win to bring pedestrian crossings up to ADA standards with accessible curb cuts and detectable warning strips. Any bike network changes that we are proposing or are considered in the future should certainly be consistent with the city's bike master plan. And we were very excited to hear about the efforts that are currently underfoot to investigate regional bike share and scooter share programs. That could certainly address some of the first mile, last mile issues that exist today. Let's see. So I can kind of speak to these as well here. But there are perception concerns, obviously, about safety. Thank you. Great. So lighting is obviously one way to address the concerns about safety. As we kind of see here, when you're going down into a dark tunnel, it does not feel the most comfortable for many pedestrians. There was also the pathway that's to the west of the busway that was mentioned to us as an area where additional lighting is needed. There's something called crime prevention through environmental design. This is an opportunity to address some of these areas in a way that is cognizant of the users, but also trying to reduce the perception that crime is possible. Any let's just say, unpleasant smells and sights should certainly be addressed expediently. That can help people obviously feel more comfortable in using the space. As was mentioned previously, public art, murals, bright colors, all those types of things on the walls and the ceilings, all that is going to make people feel more comfortable and safer as they use the facilities. And then on the busway and in the train center, electronic signage for next arrival can certainly help passengers feel more confident in the reliability of the transit service, and that can help them feel more secure in being at those locations. Speaking about transit usage, we certainly heard from others about the success of the Go Pass Fare program, how it's worked well with many employers. One employer that was mentioned that it seems like it would be a good opportunity to expand that program to is the Stanford Shopping Center. And then there was also a request that many people made about increasing bus service frequencies and adding new connections. And then finally, improving wayfinding. Well, not finding, but improving wayfinding is something that many people mentioned. MTC has this pilot program to improve wayfinding, and Palo Alto is one of the pilot areas. The only thing that I think we're excited to hear about that, we would certainly encourage that the pilot, once decisions are made about what the look and feel and everything of that wayfinding is, that it extends beyond the station into the community itself. So you have a consistent signage plan. And then finally, incentivizing the use of downtown parking garages. There's plenty of capacity in those parking garages, and I think a real short-term win could be to get more people to use those garages. How do we do that? Better signage throughout the downtown directing people to the garages. A nominal fee for on-street parking could certainly encourage many people when they learn that the parking in the garage is free. Existing parking regulations certainly need to be enforced. And in terms of when development comes in and they have to find parking for those developments, leasing those parking spaces to the parking garages is another good opportunity to make better use of that capacity. All right, so those are the short-term wins. Before I go to the next slide, I just want to couch that these are very conceptual ideas. They are a first cut at things. I am using my judgment as a transportation planner. I've been working with the team here. We're all kind of working together on this, but we would definitely encourage you, if you feel like these ideas have merit and there's excitement about them, to move forward in the next steps, with engineering, certainly drawing up the real conceptual designs of these things. But with that, if I've scared you enough here, let's dive into it. So the first idea here is to expand the busway. This would address the concerns that we heard about insufficient berthing and layover capacity. It would also include all of the bus service that's in the area, consolidating it into a single place in the Marguerite service, the Samtrans buses where they're laying over, with the 6 additional berths that I think we could get by expanding the busway. Hopefully all of that service could be put in one single place, and as you see here, it could be put so that the busway is right in front of the front door of the transit center. You connect those two modes in a way that just is not as obvious as it could be today. As was mentioned previously, the only way that I see that you could expand the busway is if you move the MacArthur Park restaurant. Just the space needed to get that space for the bus to turn around and to berth. You need that space where the MacArthur Park restaurant is today. Also part of this, I mentioned Marguerite would move over into the busway. The reason I think we could do that is, and why we would want to do that, is because we could pedestrianize University Loop. Instead of having vehicle traffic going in and around it, make it a pedestrian and bicycle safe area. This would allow you to extend the Embarcadero bike path along where the University Loop is today and down in through the development and continue it along the right of way. Yeah, okay, so moving on then. mentioning here the pedestrianization of the University Loop. That area could certainly be used for programming, for community input, in addition to providing the space for the Embarcadero bike path. In terms of University Avenue and Palm Drive, the big idea here is to take what is currently a 2-lane roadway in both directions and reduce it to a single lane, with using that the capacity that we would no longer need with single lanes in each direction for protected bike lanes. This would provide bike access right from Palm Drive, where there are existing bike ped path. It would connect to that and then continue straight under the bridge and into downtown Palo Alto. And just because I am one that is want to get a little detailed sometimes, right here where you have the development, there's going to be probably some issues of turn movements and things like that. Suffice to say that I think these are the details that I leave to you to really figure out, but I do think that there are solutions for all of them. So the other final big idea here is to close the cloverleaf, the on and off ramps connecting University Avenue to Alma Street, the circle. This space would then become available for community programming. And what it would really do is create this single continuous block from El Camino Real all the way up to High Street. And with those bike lanes that would go all the way through that, protected bike lanes all the way along that block. In terms of the overpass, I think there are 2 options that one could do. You no longer need those turn lanes for Alma Street because we're closing that connection with Alma Street. So you could have the protected bike lanes go under the overpass, or you could push out the tunnel and make it wide enough to accommodate both bikes and pedestrians, with all the lighting and murals and everything that we've talked about. But that could certainly be a much safer way for bicyclists to get through that what is currently a capacity and a safety issue today. And then the final thing I'll just mention is heading on University Avenue into downtown Palo Alto. There is every block for several blocks, there is angled parking. And the thought here is that you could change that to parallel parking, and that would get you enough space to have parking protected bike lanes so that you can connect to the bike paths that are further into downtown Palo Alto. All right, thank you very much. And I'll turn it over to the next.
Good morning. My name is Bart Treese. I'm the director of the Mobility Innovation Center at the University of Washington, representing the West Coast, former Pac-12. So nice to be here. We've had a really great visit. In my role, I work with the public sector, the private sector, nonprofits, and the university to develop innovation. And Palo Alto has a really unique history as a cradle of innovation. And as you know, as an innovator, you can't do anything alone. You have to have partnerships and teammates and shared goals and also the urgency of action and to do things to make things happen. So I like to think the best time to do something was yesterday, and the second best time to do something is right now. So think about these things in the sense of urgency, that you have a lot of momentum going for you, and now to take some of the things that we've shared and to work on that and to further the momentum that has been developed. So you have a lot in the community to be proud of, and people would love to have all the assets that you have related to a history of technology and innovation, of pioneers. Sally Ride went to school down the street over here. You have Steve Jobs grew up here. You have a garage that gave birth to personal computers. So there's a lot of really cool things that you have that nobody else has. You have one of the most premier universities in the world right down the street. And you have a lot of people that call this place home, and this is a great place to live. One thing to consider is both Stanford and Palo Alto have a shared symbol in common, the Palo Alto tree. So you have some connections already together, just that in a symbolic way that you should think about. You are sitting on valuable real estate in this area. As you've heard from my colleagues talk about, there's opportunities to do more with it. And you can also be a first mover. If you want to be an innovator and you want to be a pioneer, you're going to have to take risks, but you're going to do so by working together. So what I'm here to tell you about is how you take what we shared. I know we've dumped a lot on you here just to consider, and hopefully take some actionable steps to take that first move come Monday morning. So I like to think about this in 5 buckets. So you have governance and partnerships, transportation and mobility, land use and zoning, housing and development, funding and finance. So unfortunately, you can't do everything at once, right? But you can start making moves soon. And so some things have some near-term opportunities that you can implement pretty quickly. And others are going to take a little bit more time, but that shouldn't dissuade you from taking steps towards improvements and working on these goals. I want to talk first about governance and partnerships. Partnerships are what brought us here today. And we're grateful for the VTA, we're grateful for the City of Palo Alto and for Stanford University that convened Urban Land Institute and our advisory committee to look at these opportunities that you have here. So the first thing I would recommend do is to convene these stakeholders, but also bring Santa Clara County together. They're an entity that's not well represented here in our convenings, and there's somebody that should be at the table as you're discussing the future of the site and the adjacent parcels. So we like to put deadlines on things so we see some action. And we recommend no later than the first quarter of 2026, but that's shouldn't prevent you from picking up the phone today or tomorrow to have that conversation and try to set something up. Consider more formalized agreements amongst public sector partners and even your private partners to continue development and activation at the Palo Alto Transit Center and some of the adjacent properties. Memorandums of understandings can be non-binding, but it really can help define your goals and objectives and put those on the table. So all your partners, as you're having those conversations, you have something to work towards and you have something that is respected amongst all those entities that are at the table, and potentially also a joint powers agreement that would help formalize or serve as an operating agreement for many of the public sector entities that are at the site. What I didn't put in this bullet point that I think is worth mentioning, there's a number of law enforcement agencies that have ties to this center. And so you have 2 sheriff's departments, you have the City of Palo Alto Police Department, and a lot of the calls for service are, they're related to folks who are using the transit system. And if you have an opportunity to look at transit security or on-site security that can help mitigate some of those things that happen on the site, also create a sense of safety amongst the users there, and potentially you may reduce your calls for service from some of these responding agencies because it can take time for either the San Mateo County Sheriffs or the Santa Clara County Sheriffs to arrive. And as a result, your city officers are having to respond on site there. So finding ways to, reduce those calls for service, but have an extra body there, but also make people feel more comfortable by using the system because they have an extra set of eyes out there that can do things and try to triage those issues that come up. So Rob just talked a lot about transportation and mobility, but there's a number of things that could be done related to bike, ped, facility amenities, transit use, wayfinding, downtown parking garages. I'm not going to touch on all of these things, but promoting transit use, the Go Pass program is something that is a real success story. And you should really think about building on this to some of the other entities that have folks that take transit to get to their workplace or rely on transit to do the activities that support their daily lives. So thinking about ways to expand Transit Go to your Go Pass to the mall properties or other employers who may really want to take advantage of this program. So building more folks and more support for this program should be a really quick win to start making some forward progress on. Also, the wayfinding is an opportunity to think about co-branding for how you can identify, make a co-identity between the City of Palo Alto and Stanford, but also help people get around. Stanford has a powerful logo, and the City of Palo Alto has the Palo Alto tree as the logo. These are really easy things to think about, but if you start thinking about how you talk about these things together and have some visual representation to how you help people get around, that's going to show that your partners invested together. The facility amenities, lighting, public art. We've talked to a number of folks in the community that really want to get involved from the schools that have things to offer that would love to be invited to be a part of the transit center and help activate it. So reaching out to those entities to think about how they can get involved and provide an opportunity for civic engagement. So land use and zoning, this is, you've heard a number of comments about SB 79, and it's a game changer. So you have an opportunity to be a first mover on how you implement SB 79. And I don't know about you, I'd rather be first than last. I'd rather set the example for how to do things than have somebody tell me how to do something. So if you want to set the Palo Alto example for how to implement SB 79 and have other communities to look to you on how to do it, this is a great opportunity. And you've got an excellent facility on how to implement these things. Some of the steps that you will have to take related to shifting density to what we have called the Gateway District Zone. You may come up with a better name than us, but it's a recommendation. You also evaluate the land value benefit of existing owners and align land value capture policies to fund infrastructure, housing, or other city priorities. And of course, update your comp plan with the Gateway District Overlay Zone. We'll also have another series of recommendations here, but these are a few just to take with you. It will take some time, but starting these conversations and starting the work now will get you on that path. So housing and development. So property, so you have some leaseholders on the property, and so you know who's on the property, but if you're looking to redevelop the site, you're going to have to put yourself in a position so you can act. And so understanding when those leases are up and help them align with your development timelines are super important. You have a historic property on the site, and so moving historic property takes some time. So you want to start those things sooner rather than later, so you're not hung up on the steps that are required to relocate historic property on the site, to avoid having that conflict with your development timelines as you decide to start moving things or developing or redeveloping on that site. Funding and finance, we talked about starting soon. Some of these things take a while, so start soon. Early conversations with your MPO, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that represents Palo Alto here. Start that conversation early. And then also to work with the state of California. So building your coalition, starting with your MPO, going to the state, and then potentially also with the FHWA, you really want to try to help them leverage their abilities to help you as you work through the process. There's a lot of acronyms related to housing and funding and finance, but really, there are a lot of opportunities available, and it really does benefit you to be a first mover if you're able to take advantage of some of these programs. So they might be helpful, but you don't want to discount anything yet. You want to start figuring out what's there so you can take advantage of it. And as other communities are trying to figure out what to do with SB 79, you want to be in a position that you know what you need to do and you're able to move. So it's absolutely critical that you take a look at these things and don't discount them right away. There's also some additional funding sources potentially from the state of California. But again, these things, you need to start with your MPO, have that conversation early, figure out what's available to you so you can move quickly and be a first mover. So we want to share a few case studies that are examples of how these things can work well together. Sound Transit in the Seattle area had developed the University of Washington station, which is right on the campus of the University of Washington. So nearly 10 years ago, the station opened up. Very complicated to get a line underneath the Ship Canal, the Montlake Cut. That's but it's adjacent to a state highway, which is Montlake Boulevard. It has connections to the Burke-Gilman Trail. It's right on the university campus, but it's a great example of partnerships that work. They had to work with the state of Washington, with the Washington State Department of Transportation, the transit agencies, including King County Metro and Sound Transit, which is the developer for this site, the University of Washington, and also the City of Seattle Department of Transportation, along with other utilities. But it's a great example of partnerships that work, multimodal connections, and it's also university adjacent. Just recently, Sound Transit opened the Linwood Link Station just north of the city of Seattle. And as this was opening, there's housing that was being developed in tandem of this. So it's another example of partnerships that work. In the Seattle area, we do have a housing challenge where you don't have as many houses as we need for the demand. But as these stations are coming online, housing is being included. And it's a great example of how you can do TOD in tandem with transit-oriented development. And lastly, more locally here, the BART station in downtown Berkeley, great example of partnerships that work. Lots of multimodal connections and also more TOD that has been brought online with the station. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our chair, Brad, and then we'll open it for questions.
Thank you all very much. That concludes our presentation. And I will just say that on behalf of all of the panel, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. We felt like we were part of your community for the last 5 days. We appreciate your hospitality. And we encourage you to really go forward and strike the good strike for the moving forward on the recommendations in a way that fits your community and what you think is best for going forward into the future. We wish you well. And as we said, we're here for the next 10 or so minutes. We can answer some questions. Thanks again.
My name is Lou Thompson. I have a lot of experience in these kinds of issues. And in my experience, when obvious things don't get done, you can assume either that people are stupid or that the institutions aren't set up to address the problems. Now, clearly, we do not have a lack of intelligence here or a lack of resources, but the station has been closed for 2 years. And I cannot imagine MBTA allowing Boston South Station to be closed for 2 years. The lighting in the tunnels is awful. People feel terribly insecure. It's not a difficult technical problem, and yet the institutions themselves don't address the problem. So my question to you is, how should the institutions change here? Who should be in charge, and how do we expect people to acquire the authority and the resources they need to do the things that I think you've accurately outlined?
I would say that these issues that you raise are not unique, right? There are these constraints in every single community. I think part of what we're suggesting you do is say that this moment in time calls for these institutions to make changes, that the goal, right? So some of it is transit. The whole idea behind SB 79 is to enormously increase transit ridership and the health and success of transit agencies, because there are going to be so many more riders paying fares and taking transit. That's the idea behind it. So sometimes it's a short-term issue with financing or funding, but I think that what the conversation should be about, how do we work together? What are every organization's aspirations and constraints? And then what needs to change in order for each organization to be the partner that the other organizations need it to be? And how can you work together to get those changes made? I think it's a pivotal moment. And I think people need a reason to change. They need to feel urgency. Sometimes they need to feel that there's a threat as well. And that's the moment we're in. So I think if change is hard, but this is the time to gather your folks together to demand it.
Hi, my name is Lad Wilson, and I live very close to the transit center. In fact, right across the street at Dahl Plumbing and Heating. Was there any consideration of building a high-rise above the bus terminal center, like they have in Europe quite a bit, as far as like maybe 11-story building above where the buses are? And expanding that to accommodate the more number of buses, but to have like a residential tower above that for density.
It's very difficult to and costly to do something like that. And what we tried to set up, and it may not have been clear, is in plan view, a separation of user types. So the transit is one of the user types that doesn't play extremely well with the other user types from an insurance perspective. And so when you can separate those user types, it's more feasible. I don't think it's an impossible lift, but it didn't seem one necessary given all of the other land around these areas to focus on yet.
Andy Kaczynski with Fair and Pierce. Really appreciate the transportation concept from Rob, and curious if you have any thoughts about the pickup and drop off, how to set that up for success with the new configuration.
This would be pickup and drop off for private vehicles, passenger vehicles. Certainly, I haven't given it a lot of thought, I will admit, but off the top of my head, there's still, with the development along Alma Street, it wasn't, a straight shot of townhouses that were being proposed. So it seems to me like you could probably accommodate some level of pickup and drop off along Alma Street as exists today.
Thank you. This is just a technical question for Andrew. I feel like when you were, I'm Julie, I'm on the city council. When you were talking about unlocking land value, you said, get ready for this. This may be hard. There's a balance between, the land grab that developers might want to make and, not letting that happen. And then the slides got a little, the slides weren't advancing the way you wanted. And I feel like we didn't get the next sentence or two out of you. If we did, I apologize. I missed it, but it was an enticing concept. And I wonder if you could just say 3 or 4 sentences more about unlocking the land value through, how did you put it?
Land value capture.
Land value capture.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the state of California, typically land value capture programs have been implemented through inclusionary housing programs. That is a set aside of a certain number of rent restricted units. In this particular case, I think you should consider more than merely the inclusionary housing component. I encourage a mix of income levels at this site. I think it's the right way to build our housing. However, with a land ownership at this location, there may be other ways to leverage sort of or gain benefit from that extra value that's increased to serve other community needs as well. The infrastructure improvements will be expensive. The operations of the station will be expensive. And so all of these things should be considered, not merely just inclusionary housing.
The only other thing I would add is, the land is more or less under control at this point. And so that also, not necessarily from a monetary perspective, but from a ease of development perspective, the fact that that land is controlled and does not need to be otherwise assembled is also a huge opportunity.
And I would also just say that because this isn't going to be, in some cases, fee simple transactions with the sale of property, that, again, partnerships, transparency, some assets are going to increase in value substantially because of the new zoning categories. That doesn't mean that there's going to be a transaction where there's a dollar amount, but that increased asset value does create benefits to the owner of that asset. And so figuring out other ways that there can be some shared benefit from the action that increased that value is what we're talking about. So it's not necessarily a single mechanism, but kind of a concept.
We have time for perhaps one more question before we turn it back to our local host to conclude the morning. So if there's one final burning question, we can take that.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you so much for this. My name is Vicki. I'm the vice mayor here. I loved what you said at one of the later slides about bringing in other stakeholders and expanding the conversation? Because I was wondering about that as I was listening. This is an amazing start with the three supporting entities, but I'm wondering about specifically now that you've looked at this, like Caltrain, that's the landowner right down the middle in that zipper. We're right on the border with San Mateo County. You mentioned Santa Clara County, but San Mateo County, Samtrans, they're laying their buses over in these entry and exit lanes. What do you think about, I was kind of expecting to hear about those entities. So I'm wondering if you could get a little more detailed on that. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I mean, we used VTA. We're great at hosting us and connecting us with those entities, but I think those are great ideas. I mean, I feel for some of those operators on those systems as they're laying over on El Camino Real and there's a porta potty on the sidewalk. That's not something that those operators should do. So finding ways to get them so they can, be a part of the transit center is a really good step when you're thinking about the stakeholders and how you want to organize those next steps. So finding ways to help them improve their overall service and conditions is a really good opportunity. But thinking about who else needs to be at the table is a great way of, and you did a great start. We have a great list of people that we talk to. Build off that list as you're working towards your next steps to include those entities that probably need to have a bigger voice at the table, but also could be a really good collaborative partner for you.
I would also just say that when you look at the 8 counties that are affected by SB 79, they cluster into really different sorts of places. You'd never compare Santa Clara with LA County, right? But San Mateo, right? Santa Clara, there might be a cluster in the peninsula of places that are very alike and have similar issues and might have similar solutions to problems. So I think it'd be a great idea to convene the ones that are kind of alike to see if you can't develop some solutions together and approaches going forward that make sense, and that also just make it easier for everybody to kind of accelerate the pace of their learning, because there's a lot to learn under this new set of rules.
Hello. I think I'm supposed to do the wrap up now. So first, I want to really thank not only all the ULI representatives who participated and everybody who participated as stakeholders. Many of you are here, but also really to emphasize that this came out of this VTA ad hoc committee that we have that has the commitment of our CEO, who has already allocated $1 million in what was the Measure A funding toward beginning these next steps, and additional dollars behind that. The VTA ad hoc includes our board chair and our county supervisor. But most importantly, it has already convened these agencies. So I'm sorry that maybe that wasn't conveyed well enough, but the ad hoc committee was designed and is bringing together as partner agencies, not only VTA, Stanford, the City of Palo Alto, and Caltrain as the 4 strongest partners, but also Samtrans for San Mateo County, AC Transit, and the active participation of MTC. So that's what is the momentum that actually was the genesis for this process. And now this gives us an additional basis to proceed on the near-term, medium-term, and long-term plans for this station area. One of the things that we've talked about there is that we actually do have a plan for this station area. In fact, we have 5 plans over the last 30 years. And I don't know if they're actually physically sitting on the same shelf, but they are figuratively so. And the challenge is how we go from great visioning to something that is actually achievable. And that was one of the reasons that we really have wanted to bring all the agencies together. We just yesterday at MTC completed a 2-day workshop, much of that around what's called our transit-oriented community program and the funding for it, and really discussing what works and what doesn't. I want to call out one of the things that gets too little attention. It was spoken about here about how Palo Alto and Stanford have been real leaders in driving transit use through pervasive transit passes of employees and residents. For example, out of the the Caltrain Go Pass program, 75% of all the Go Passes are from Palo Alto and Stanford in the entire system, 43,000 passes. Similarly, on the VTA Smart Pass program, tens of thousands of passes from Palo Alto. So that convergence between the development model and how we really drive transit use is a really important discussion. Lastly, I did want to touch on those who are interested in this, the intersection between this transit station and broader land use issues. The City Council on Wednesday night had its presentation, first cut presentation on the implications of SB 79. And the city and the council had initiated over a year ago, and we were just getting really momentum on a downtown housing plan to look at how we have both affordable housing and broader housing densification at the human scale that was talked about here, that is really an essential characteristic to our community. Our planning staff and legal staff presented a first cut on the implications of SB 79. And unfortunately, there's a real tension, if not a disconnect, between the concepts and how it's characterized and the actual implications potentially on the community. Where it looks like we're going to need to throw out the work that we were doing on our downtown housing plan and figure out how we would really accommodate what is still a not well understood set of implications of SB 79. So conceptually, the notion of transit-oriented development, I think, is universally embraced. It's specifically embraced by the city, but we have a much more far-reaching and stipulating set of requirements now under SB 79 that we don't yet fully understand its implications, and it's going to be a real challenge, but it certainly will have significant impacts. So all that, what we've received from ULI, really is going to help feed into this next set of efforts. And as was stated, this collaboration of the entities is what's essential. And as was stated at the end, is that collaboration needs to be open and transparent and really working together. I do want to note that finally, it's after 5 years of the station building closed, not 2. We have an RFP going out for that. The bathrooms are actually available only to the transit providers, the bus drivers, et cetera, not to the public yet. And the tunnels, the city is actually moving forward this fall with an upgrade to lighting systems, painting, and other upgrades to the tunnels. So some things are actually happening now in the near term, and that we hope will really build the enthusiasm to help spur the momentum for these medium and longer term plans, and specifically the whole implications of the Quarry Road extension and the complete redesign of the bus movements and the bike and ped circulation there. So this is really an exciting foundation. Once again, thank you to ULI. Thank you to all of you who have participated till now, and hopefully we'll continue to participate as we go forward. And it's been a really exciting work that's gone on here this week. Thank you all.